Did that, darn it. I was not going to go whoof when I started. But, oh my. Well, I suppose being in Indiana, you're familiar with all kinds of famous Hoosiers. But I had to write this down. How many of you think much about one of your most famous Hoosiers ever, Eugene Victor Debs? Eugene Victor Debs, born in 1855, died in 1926, from Terre Haute, Indiana. At the age of 14, he had to get a job. He got a job scraping the grease and the paint off of railroad cars for 50 cents a day. Then he got a promotion to fireman on the railroad. Now I'm going to read this because I knew I would not memorize it. What it meant to be a fireman was working in the locomotive next to the engineer, shoveling coal into a firebox, as much as 2 tons an hour, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. That's what he did. 2 tons an hour, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. Firemen caked in coal dust, blinded by the wind and the smoke, had to make sure the engine didn't explode, which they weren't always able to stop. If they lived long enough, firemen became engineers, which was safer than being a switchman or a brakeman, which involved working next to the moving train on the tracks or racing along its top in any weather at the risk of toppling off and getting run over. Obviously, if you died on the job or were injured, there were no benefits, there was no safety net, your family was out of luck, they were welcome to starve. This led him to become an activist, to work to level out pay grades. As he wrote later, looking at that $1.50 an hour that he earned on the railroad, he said, if a fireman works for 4,444 years and 300 days, he would finally come level with the grandson of Cornelius Vanderbilt, who was given $1 million by his grandfather and $1 million by his father. He could finally say that all men are created equal. Eugene Debs ran for president 5 times and got millions of votes. Obviously, he never became president. The last time he ran for president from prison for standing up for these railroad workers. He was sentenced to 60 years at hard labor when he was over 60 years old, refused to ask for a pardon, was eventually released, and died a broken man. As I said, you probably haven't thought much about him, but he is one of the real heroes from the Hoosier State for recognizing that there is a great difference between not the comfortable and the poor, but the richest members of our society and the poor. And it's not clear that it's all that different today. This came to mind because Luke's message is not as sweet or as nice as Matthew's. Matthew is famous for the Sermon on the Mount, which begins, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." It's got some pretty tough words there, but it's also talking about the differences in the different religious groups in Judea and Galilee. But when Luke gives us what he calls the Sermon on the Plain, the Sermon on the Flat Place, not the Sermon on the Mount, it has a whole different perspective. Now, this is not surprising. Jesus, on more than one occasion, would use the same image for a different reason. When Jesus talks about the people wanting a sign, in Mark, he says, I'm not giving any sign. In Matthew, he tells us the sign that these people will get will be the sign of Jonah. Jonah is in the great fish for 3 days and is spewed forth, and so the Son of Man will be killed, be in the earth for 3 days, and rise up. But in Luke, when asked for a sign, he said they'll get the sign of Jonah. But there he tells us the sign of Jonah is that Jonah preached to the Ninevites, that great evil nation. And those people repented. And God's people who knew better did not. So Jesus, like any of us, was quite capable of using the same image for a different purpose. And here we have what is called the Sermon on the Plain, that they gathered around him, people on a flat place, a great crowd of his disciples, and also a great crowd of all the people from around Judea and Jerusalem, and in the area on the coastline of Tyre and Sidon. Now they came for 2 reasons. They came to hear him, and they also came to be healed. And both of those are important, that we hear Jesus, and also by hearing him, be healed. They had various ailments. Many of them, as we see, are inside their hearts. They're spiritual, they're emotional ailments. And so that's the first thing that has to happen. If they can be healed, then they can hear. And then he begins to speak. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus doesn't say, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." He gets right down to brass tacks. Blessed are the poor, period. He is going to talk about economics. And every time we start talking about economics, it gets a little uncomfortable. It does for me. I'd like to think that I'm one of the poor. But unfortunately, like you, I have a television, and I'm aware of what's going on, not only in the world, but even in our own nation. And I am uncomfortably comfortable. If this were not true, it would not be necessary for me to be going to Weight Watchers. And if it were not true, I wouldn't have gotten, did you notice I got the price right on the double stuff? I did not know this was coming, but I know what the really good stuff costs, which you buy when your spouse is not looking and then just disappears. So I feel these words are talking to me. Blessed are the poor. I want to make sure you understand that I don't think Jesus is idolizing the poor. The poor can be annoying. The poor may not always do what you want them to do. They don't jump through the hoops and say, "Oh, thank you so very much for giving me a little extra." Oh, they might actually want to have as much as us. Blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of God. Blessed are those who are hungry now, because they'll be filled. Blessed are those who cry now, because they'll be comforted. They will laugh. And then finally, and this is the one, we all care about what people think about us. Blessed are you if people look down on you, if they hate you. It uses a funny word here. It says that you should skip for joy. The skipping for joy is the word that's used in the ancient Greek whenever in a play, silly people would come on and dance across and everybody would laugh. Look how silly they're skipping. And that's the silliness of the joy that we have, that we don't care what we look like. We don't care what people think, because we are finally feeling every bit of as good as we should have. We wake up, the ailments are gone. We wake up, we feel healthy for the first time in years. I've got a feeling that we woke up because there was a bright light and we could see all the relatives that have gone on before us, and we are in a better place, is what's happening here. But, we're finally, things are happening. And then he turns it around, and then he starts talking to me, which I always hate in Scripture. Woe to you. By the way, sometimes when I'm translating here, I have to look at a funny word and figure out what it means. Woe is easy. Do you know what woe is in the Greek? Whoa. It's what you say when you realize, oh, darn, the Patriots won the Super Bowl. I couldn't watch TV for a week. Oh, whoa. Woe to you who are rich, because you already got your reward, you know. Woe to you who are laughing now. And boy, I laugh at a lot of things, but to remind myself that I need to be looking around at the world and seeing what's going on. Woe to you who are full now. Woe to you. Boy, am I guilty. And woe are you when you get the compliments you really want. When you walk around town and people like you and think well of you, well, I'm glad they do, but guess what? People liked the false prophets because they said everything's okay. Everything's fine. Don't worry. Don't change. We like it the way it is. And this is where Jesus is really talking about turning the world upside down. He wants us to get the equivalent of a dope slap, like when we watched the Three Stooges as a kid. I don't think I'd make the Three Stooges now. I'm sure that it wouldn't be proper. But you know that whenever one of them would say something dumb, they'd get a dope slap to kind of bring them to themselves. Don't do this at home, folks, please. I'm not saying do that, but there are times when I have to have bad news. There are times when the doctor has to come in and not sugarcoat it so that I can make a change. Because we can change. There's a wonderful poster of Albert Einstein with the definition of insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get a different result. Now, the reason Einstein's on the poster is he's a genius and he's always right. Since that poster and that saying was not associated with Einstein until the 1980s, he probably didn't say it. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't make it any less true. The fact is, if we keep doing the same things, if we keep saying it's all right for some people to be incredibly rich so that their lives are not touched by ordinary lives and they have no conception what it's like to miss a paycheck. And on the other hand, I have people who are 2 missed paychecks away from being homeless. There's something wrong. It was wrong 2,000 years ago in the Roman Empire, and it's wrong now. And it's wrong that we live on a different planet in the United States than many people live elsewhere in the world. And that even with our flawed safety nets, we are far more secure and safer than the way people live elsewhere. And if we keep doing that, we're not going to get the right answer. We're going to remain insane as a people. Well, where is the answer? There's a wonderful line at the end of a C.S. Lewis novel. Sometimes God doesn't give an answer. Sometimes God is the answer. Sometimes God doesn't give an answer. Sometimes God is the answer. Jesus is the answer that is calling out by his words, by his example, and by calling things as they really are, inviting us to change the way we live. Last night, a few of us got a chance to go to the spa banquet. That word for spa that's often in there, it makes us think that it's a spa, that you're going there for a beauty treatment, and in a way you are. But it is, here in our county, a halfway house program for women who are not only involved in drug and alcohol abuse, but usually the victims of sexual and physical violence. And as often happens, last night we hear devastating stories of people whose lives seem to have nowhere else to go. A woman who was dropped off by her grandmother, who told her, "Don't worry, your dad will come to see you soon." And she discovers a few days later that her mother has murdered her father, and her grandmother was busy helping to hide the fact, to cover it up. They knew this was going to happen. We hear stories of people who been beaten been sexually abused, and sunk further and deeper into drug or alcohol abuse and are finding no real answers. And maybe they have found an answer in Jesus. Maybe they have found an answer, but we know the story's not over yet and that we can't tie a neat little bow on it. These are the people Jesus is talking about, that they will be happy, that they will be on the right side of history when the tables are turned. You notice Jesus doesn't say anything about belief. He doesn't say, woe to you who are infidels. Woe to you who go to the wrong church. Woe to you who go to the wrong church in your own denomination. Oh, he's hitting us where it hurts because we work all our lives to have a sense of security, and sometimes we do that at the expense of others without realizing we need to be taking everybody else along with us. That if we are not all fed and comfortable and laughing and secure together, then we're not really happy and we're not really secure. Luke is writing to a Roman Empire in which probably 60% of the people are slaves. A couple percent are well-fed, and the rest, if they are not slaves, might as well be. When we see the tombs of Christians during the first few centuries of Christianity, we see a lot of slave names because the message spoke to them. We see only a few names of the wealthy. And we know from the descriptions that finally rich and poor were coming together to eat at the same table, sharing the same food, and being one community. And they were also sharing the danger that comes when you walk out of step with society. I'm not sure that I'm telling you, you're going to get off the hook here a little bit, to sell everything and give it to the poor, because then I'm not sure how we'll hit you up for more money for the poor next week. I'm not sure that that's the answer. But I do know that every time we feel too comfortable for our own good, we need Jesus to knock us down a peg and to ask us if the price is right. If what we're paying and what we're doing and what we're doing to maintain our lifestyle is the true value of everything. Or if there is a deeper, if there is a truer value that should guide who we are and how we live and why we love and what kind of life we are living. Know the value of everything you say and do. Break the insanity and the dysfunction in which we seem to have found ourselves. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who revile you. It sounds crazy, but Jesus says it works. Whatever we've been doing before hasn't. So we might as well give that a try and see if we can break the cycle. Who knows? If we hear Jesus, if we are healed by Jesus, we may find true peace and true joy and true happiness. Amen.